Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. All right, so I think we'll just get started now. Welcome to the first online session for the Love All Play talk series by Badminton Victoria, which is our LGBTI plus edition. My name is Olivia Na, and I'm from Badminton Victoria, and I'll be your host for this evening. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, wherever you are in Victoria, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people attending today. So I think we can all agree that we are attending tonight because we love sport and have experienced the benefits of sport and what it can bring to the livelihood of individuals and communities. So we thank you for joining us today to celebrate our diverse sporting community. And it is also Olympic Day, so happy Olympic Day. So tonight we will also open this conversation about making our sport more accessible and discuss some of the barriers to participation that are experienced by various communities. So tonight's LGBTI plus session is the first of the Badminton Victoria talk series, Love All Play. And in the future, we hope to use these events to have more dialogue with our badminton community and learn together about how to include more people in our sport. So we wanted to thank Sport and Recreation Victoria and Vicsport for their support for the event. And of course, want to thank our amazing lineup of guest speakers who you'll be hearing from tonight. So there's Rudy Rigg, Granger from Proud to Play, Stephanie Chung and Nicole from Shuttlecats, Mark Gristock and Sang Tai from the Melbourne Smashers. And also online is my colleague, Nick Pettitt from Badminton Victoria. So I want to thank him as well for supporting this event behind the scenes tonight. All right, so before we introduce our first speaker, we're going to set some ground rules, some virtual ground rules. So first of all, please be reminded that this event is being recorded and the footage will be published online for public viewing and listening and as a resource so we can all learn together. And by participating tonight, please support a safe and welcoming environment for all participants during the event, whoever they are, what their role is, or whatever their background or ability is. We respect that participants who wish to remain anonymous will be, and we ask you to do the same where possible. We understand that some may find the content presented as sensitive or triggering. So if you are affected and you wish to remove yourself from the event, you may do so at any time, no questions asked. And we just want to remind everyone that so our guest speakers have been very generous with their time to be here. And while they are invited to answer all your questions, please note that they are not obligated to answer all of them, but they're a lovely group of people, so I'm sure they will try and be as helpful as possible. So how to ask your question. So as you notice, you can't see everyone. You'll be able to see us and the speakers and the panel. You can't view all the attendees, but how you can ask a question is using the question and answer window on Zoom. So if you're on your computer, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the window. So if you click on that, a little window comes up. If you're on a mobile device, you may need to swipe or tap on your screen to reveal those buttons, but it's a Q&A button. In this Q&A button function window, you have the option to ask anonymously, and our guest speakers will be able to view your questions, the questions that you post, and they may choose to answer your question live on video or address it later in the session. They may choose to type in a response like by text, so that is also the case. But yeah, please use the question and answer box, not the chat box, but we will have eyes on it, but if you want your question addressed tonight, please use the question and answer box. And that will be available throughout the whole event. So some speakers will be able to answer it on the spot and some may answer it a bit later. It's also worth noting that you have the LGBTI quick guide that was provided to you before the event in a link. And we recommend you have that around for reference, particularly about maybe some of the language and terminology that may be used in the event tonight. All right, so now that we've set those bit of information there, I want to introduce our first guest. So our first guest is Rudy Rigg. So Rudy is a 23-year-old non-binary transgender person from Birraranga or Melbourne. He is from a family with a huge history in the sport and has played at a state level between the ages of 12 and 21 years old. Fun fact, we played in a state team together back in 2018. So now that he's a specialist coach in the badminton program at Wesley College. And when he's not coaching, he's pursuing a career in the creative industry, writing, illustrating, and working on set with his sister as a fashion videographer. In the past 2 years, Rudy has begun to more passionately advocate for LGBTI plus representation and rights and continues to help others to find their own voice. So Rudy, would you like to join us online? Hey.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Sorry, like my computer's a little bit slow, but I'm here. All right. So bear with me while I get my screens organized. Alrighty. So as you just heard, my name is Rudy and I am a non-binary trans person. So just to clarify what non-binary means, as I'm sure that most of you might have heard the word transgender kind of roll around here and there, but the term non-binary is something that is a little bit less covered in the media particularly. So the term non-binary literally, if you take the words, means not on the binary of gender. So if you've got male over here and female over here, being non-binary essentially means you don't adhere to either end of the scale. However, in my case, I don't really consider gender to be a scale. I like to use the word galaxy because it's quite imaginative, but it also kind of really encapsulates being kind of somewhere out there. At the end of the day, I'm just human. I'm just a human like everyone else. And I personally, have masculine and feminine traits to myself, both physically and mentally. And I just live my life as I want to and as I need to. So that's kind of what being non-binary means to me. However, my pronouns are he, him. So they are a masculine pronoun. So I just thought I'd clarify that for anyone who may have been wondering. So yeah, let's jump into it. Look, I have been playing badminton for as long as I can remember. My family is quite heavily involved in the sport. I am the third generation of being involved in badminton in Victoria and in Australia. So just really quickly, my family history kind of goes a little bit like this. My grandmother, Jean Tyrrell, she has taken copious amounts of Australian teams. She took a Commonwealth team in the 1990s. She was kind of the national coach for a while there, late 80s to early 90s. So she's a very successful badminton coach in Victoria. My mum is Michelle Tyrrell or Michelle Rigg, and she is also a very successful badminton coach and a very successful badminton player. She was a triple junior national champion, and she's also coached players, like a lot of players, to be state and national level as well. Then my uncle is Paul Tyrrell. He also played in the 2 Commonwealth Games, and he was a very good player. And his daughter, Vanessa Tyrrell, or Vanessa Jackson now, is a very, very good player as well and has also represented Australia. So I've been a state level player, and my sister has also been a junior national doubles champion as well. So I'm very proud of my family's achievements in badminton, and I feel very privileged to have come from a family that has had such a large success, but also that has loved the sport so much. So being trans and having such a heavy involvement in badminton has been quite an experience for me. For a long time, I didn't really think the two were related in any way. And I thought that being a transgender person and being a badminton player were separate. Especially when I was younger, I had a lot of complex emotions about it, and I tried to separate the two. But unfortunately, you can't really separate something you love from a big part of your identity. So what I plan to do in the next few minutes is just to really quickly outline some of the major events in my badminton career, and how they impacted my experience being transgender, and also how me being transgender, impacted my experience in badminton. So really, for myself, I knew from a really early age, especially going into puberty, that I did not feel comfortable with the body that I was developing. I couldn't really put my finger on it for a long time. And by a long time, I mean, I kind of noticed this at about 10 and 11, and I didn't really have any language for it until I was about 14. I tried really hard to accept and really love my body, but something wasn't clicking. So for me, that caused a lot of discomfort. It caused a lot of mental health issues, if I'm being really, really honest. And it was not a great time. In terms of how that came across in badminton, obviously, while everyone else was kind of growing up and developing physically, in their bodies, I really felt a disconnect between what I desperately wanted and hoped for my body and what was actually happening. So that was really hard to kind of comprehend, especially in trying to do something physically and achieve something with my body. It's kind of like a really weird space to be in, especially when you're younger. I particularly remember the 2012 under 17 nationals. That was a really hard nationals for me to play in. It was the first time I was away from home. It was in Tasmania. And that year prior, and then into that year, was the year that I really figured out that I was not cisgendered, so that I was transgendered. And so I was very emotionally sensitive, and I was very physically conscious of my body. And it was really hard to juggle between having to trust and respect my body to perform at nationals, but then also have this overwhelming and intense disappointment, because I just felt like I knew who I was in my head, but it wasn't being translated through the only thing that people can really experience, which is the physical expression of my existence, so my body. So being in that stadium with the top performing athletes in badminton of my age was an extremely hard thing to do. And I found that it left me very emotionally self-conscious, and it left me in a very vulnerable place mentally, because I didn't have the tools to cope with it, and I didn't really still have a lot of language to describe what was going on with my head. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And when you're not really sure and you're young, you just turn that on yourself. So I was just in a place of denial, really, and a lot of shame. I truly thought that if I stopped thinking about how my body and how I was growing up and who I was turning out to be, that it would just go away. But unfortunately, after I came home from that nationals, it didn't go away. I mean, it was never going to go away. But I felt that I was accepting of myself to a point that I was capable of making a decision. And it's a decision that I wish I'd never had to make, because it really, truly did affect everything that followed and everything that happened in my badminton playing career. And the decision was to either come out as trans and accept that I was transgender and to deal with everything that was going to go with that, or to continue to ignore that part of me and accept that I would have to bear that on my shoulders to continue playing and participating in a sport that I loved. Because I played that nationals and I wanted to play the next nationals and the nationals after that and see what happened after that. And so to me, coming out as transgender was just, that's it, I can't play anymore. Just conferring on my notes again because my head is a bit of a sieve. At the time, there was no real advocacy for being transgender anywhere. I'm particularly into movies and media and things like that. And, you know, all of the media at the time was portraying trans people in a really horrible light. There's a quote here by a transgender movie critic who was talking about a few transgender related movies that came out at that time that some of them ended up being up for Academy Awards and things like that, like Dallas Buyers Club, which came out in 2013. And Clark says that they simply reinforce the status quo of prior trans films' characters as those that are there simply to be tragic and die, to be killed, or someone who will eventually murder someone. So obviously I saw that and I was like, I don't want to be like that. I'm not, you know, I'm not going to die. I don't want to be murdered. I was very scared, so I didn't come out. I was really supported during this time in that I didn't talk about it. So for me, the support I was getting was not really like, yes, you know, like everything's okay, Rudy, we support you. It was just kind of a lack of negative comments. And I'm really lucky that my family have always been very open, very progressive. So I never felt scared of coming out to them. I was just scared of everything else. That was just a question that's come into the Q&A box. I might address it further on if we've got time. So that was kind of what happened as a kid. I just decided I can't do this. It's going to like ruin my whole badminton career. So I stayed in the, you know, in, I guess I wasn't out until, well, 2019. I played the nationals at the start of 2019. And I was on a very, very, very low dose of testosterone because I acknowledged that, you know, there's no regulations that kind of cover that sort of thing that was accessible to me at the time. And I wanted to play that last nationals before commencing a full dose of testosterone, which is hormone replacement therapy. And so I played that nationals, and then I thought, well, I can't hold this off any longer. I have to start taking this testosterone. It's making me too fragile with my mental health. I need to do it. So I played that nationals and just kind of essentially personally retired without telling anyone because I knew that I wouldn't feel comfortable competing. So I started on the full dose of testosterone. Felt like I said goodbye to badminton playing forever, and decided to come out to everyone in my life that I hadn't already come out to because I was already doing it very slowly through 2018 and 2019. That all kind of wrapped up when I came out at work at Wesley College, and I was super surprised with how they took everything. I even got an applause from our first team squads when I told them all after training one day. And honestly, that one experience gave me the confidence to just do what I'm doing now. And that followed into me booking in to get top surgery, which is like the kind of conversational term for what's I think is medically termed as like a chest reconstruction. Which is kind of, it's going to masculinize my chest. So I'm having that next month, which I'm really, really excited for because I will feel 100% myself after that. But yeah, it's not easy. I haven't had any overtly phobic experiences happen to me in the badminton sphere, but I have had some pretty nasty things happen to me outside of the badminton community. But obviously one experience, no matter where it is, can really taint you. and make it harder for you to kind of get out of that comfort zone that it's put around you. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm really grateful that Badminton Victoria is doing this event, because without it, who knows, I might never have felt comfortable to play again. So I'm really grateful that I'm able to speak about this, and speak about what I've been through, albeit very anecdotally. And yeah, so thank you. I'll pass it back to Olivia now.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Thanks for sharing, and yeah, we'll look forward to chatting more with you again on the panel later in the session. All right, so our next guest speaker is Christine Granger, who was recently appointed the CEO of Proud to Play, an organisation that advocates for LGBTI plus people to feel safe and confident to lead healthy and active lifestyles in inclusive environments. So she's got a wealth of experience in sporting, non-for-profit and government sectors across different continents. So yeah, looking forward to hearing from Christine. Thank you, Christine.
Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Rudy, for sharing your journey and your story. It takes a lot to put yourself out there. And before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work, the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and repay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and any community who may be with us tonight. I've got a bit of a presentation, but I'll try and whiz through it a bit to keep us on time. But before we start, I feel like a bit of background about why I came into this space and why I think it's important. I've worked in inclusion in sport for a long time now, across a variety of areas. And as a gay woman, I felt it was time for me to focus on giving back to my community, and my personal experience through sport as a woman and as a gay woman, and I guess how that's impacted me and my views on it as well. I think growing up in a small village in the northeast of England that is not diverse. I think there was one Chinese family and one Indian family, and that was it. So our exposure to communities from different backgrounds was very limited. My dad travelled through work, so I was quite lucky in the sense that I got a broader experience than some people. But I grew up at a time where sexuality and gender, and in particular gender, were not spoken about. I grew up knowing that I didn't really understand that I didn't like boys. I didn't understand what all the fuss was about with my friends when they told me that I fancy this person. Who do you fancy? I'm like, well, I don't know, Craig. I just knew that I didn't like boys, but I didn't really understand why. And it wasn't until I got older that I figured that out. But I also grew up at a time where I grew up with all boys, and I played football to the point that was social. And as I started getting into school, there was this, you can't play because you're a girl kind of attitude. And so my response to that, and this was over multiple things, was to go and get my head shaved, because that seemed like the logical response to me as a child, so that I looked like a boy. And apparently that is not how it works. But then with that came other issues, predominantly from adults, in the sense that because I looked like a boy, my life became more difficult. I had to justify to people why I was using the girls' bathrooms, and was asked on multiple occasions to prove that I was a girl by adults. And so to try and I'm not gender diverse, I'm not transgender, but to go through that experience and to not feel safe going into a public space is something that, when you come from a marginalised community, is hard to explain to people who've never experienced that. And I think that our sporting clubs and our community clubs in particular, these are the sorts of things you can start to look at and address, and try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and it will help you to get a better understanding of some of the changes you can make. So with that, I will share my screen and hopefully it'll work, and we'll jump into a little bit of a presentation. There we go. So as Olivia said, Proud to Play is an organisation that was founded in 2016 to support LGBTI plus community in engaging in sport and recreation, and to support the sector more broadly to be more inclusive of the community. One of the things we get asked very regularly is, why bother? Why do we need to have programs and policies and practices in place to engage marginalised communities? And when I talk about inclusion, I talk about broadly the different groups that within society that are marginalised. And I've thrown up some images for you, some of which may be a little confronting, because I feel like this is why. You know, we have moved forwards, but we also haven't moved far enough. So I think there's more that we can do. People have the right to be included, people have the right to play, and people are just people. So when I get asked why, this is the reason why. Nobody should be made to feel excluded because of their race or their religion or their sexuality or gender. People are just people, and you get bad and good everywhere. So it brings culture and experience to our community to learn from others. So we'll go through some of the stats very briefly, because they paint a telling picture for our community. So when we look at the research, 80% of the Australian population broadly, so not LGBTI plus population broadly, have experienced or witnessed homophobia on the sporting field. 50% of trans people avoid playing sports they would like to play. 50% of people are not out as sexuality or gender diverse to their sporting peers, and 70% of LGBTI plus people do not feel sport is safe and welcoming. And they're two words that I think really stand out to me, the idea of being safe and welcoming. And if you've, like I said before, if you've never experienced discrimination, it's hard to explain that sense to people. We have 10% of the population, based on data, which can be a little bit questionable at times, who are same-sex attracted. So, you know, you're talking a good figure in the community in terms of people we can be engaging and getting active. We have the terms and definitions that I won't go into in detail because Olivia sent you out that amazing document. So I would say try and get your head around some of these and educate yourself a bit. Most people are not going to be offended if you get it wrong, as long as you have good intentions. But it'll also help you understand the differences within the community. Understanding the difference between sex and gender. Now, this is the genderbread person, and there are multiple different diagrams out there to help you with this, but it's a really good starting point to explain the difference between sex and gender, which a lot of people get caught up on, and they don't necessarily understand the difference. Basically, sex are the biological makeup that you were given at birth, and gender is your emotions and how you feel. That's the really simple, short, nutshell sort of side of it. And you can go into this into a lot of detail, but it's different for every person, particularly around gender expression and gender identity. People experience that differently. There's a lot of learning to be done in that space. So I'd say try and educate yourself on that, and understand the power of language. One of the things that people think that a lot of the time discrimination is played out through actions, in terms of physical actions, but a lot of the time it's what is unsaid that can be quite damaging or off-putting, and it's not necessarily intentional by people. It can be unintentional because people don't know, and that comes back to that sense of fear, and we'll come to that in terms of things you can be doing as a club later. But look at your language, look at what you're writing, and look at your body language, because that says a lot to a person when they come into a space. Some examples of inclusive language. We use gendered terms all the time, and if we were doing a face-to-face session, I'd have a whole bunch of different activities for you to go through. But some really basic examples is, do you have a girlfriend? The linesman called it out. Hey guys, which is something I'm very guilty of because of where I come from. It's a term we use very generically, and I have to pull myself up on it. Ask your mum and dad if you can volunteer this weekend. So some examples about how you can adjust your language. Instead of using "do you have a girlfriend," do you have a partner? The lines person called it out, or the assistant referee called it out. Hey everyone, hey folks is a very common term used within the sort of gender diverse and transgender community as well. And ask your parents if they can volunteer this weekend. Don't presume what a family setup is. It can be very different for a lot of people. So parents is a really good term to use. And even in your documents as a club, using terms like parents and guardians rather than mum and dad will be inclusive of a whole group of people and not just the LGBTI plus community. Looking from the outside in, is what do people see when they see your club? You know, when I've worked with a lot of clubs and you go in and you talk to them and you say, are you inclusive? And the general response is, yeah, well, like anyone can come and play. But most of them can't expand on how, because most people don't sit down and sort of take a look at themselves and take a look at the environment that they're in and how that can be perceived by other people. And it comes down to really simple things a lot of the time. I think people get caught up on this idea that inclusion is really hard, when the reality is there's really basic stuff that we can be doing to make people feel more included. And that's the things like images. So if you were to look at your club social media feed and go, okay, let's look at the past 5 days of the information that we've put out there. What gets the most? What are you putting up there the most? 9 times out of 10 with a lot of clubs, it will be senior men's teams, followed by junior boys teams, then the women's, well, usually the kids, and then the women's teams. So that's the common across most sports. So have a look at that and have a look at varying the spread and being conscious of what you're putting out there. Is there diversity within your club? Now, don't be tokenistic about it. That's something that you don't want, but is there diversity? And what is that image that you're putting out there? In that sense, what's the language that's on the posts that you're putting out? Flyers as well. And what are people hearing around the grounds or within the facility that you're in? The culture that you create within your club is led by the people who are in it, and predominantly the coach, particularly in team sports. But the people who are, you know, the nucleus, the leaders within your club, they're the ones that sort of set the culture. And that is, for something as a sport, we need to be looking at what kind of culture do we want to set for ourselves. So have a look at that. Is it inclusive language? You know, is it something that you feel is respectful to people? When you're using flyers, are you putting guys, girls, boys, men, or are you using less gendered terms? Are you using family? Are you using parents, guardians, that sort of thing? Are there visible LGBTQI plus symbols across your promotion? So for LGBTQI plus people and for a lot of marginalised communities, whenever you go into a new setting, you're always coming out. You know, you don't just come out and that's it, it's done. You're coming out every time you meet somebody new, every time there's a new job, every time there's a new club, and there's this sense of, can I go in here and can I be myself? And am I going to be safe if I do that? Which is something that a lot of people don't have to experience. So it might seem, you know, a very small thing, but having a rainbow flag to me says, okay, well, at least they're aware, you know, and at least they understand that. It doesn't mean that everything else is going to be perfect, but at least there's an understanding and I can possibly raise a question. So things like that. And that comes down again to the language that you're using. Don't just use a rainbow flag, use trans flags, use non-binary flags, get yourself across the different types of flags that are out there so that you can support people. Are you promoting events on you know, the LGBTI plus calendar, like Ida Hobbit Day, Trans Awareness Week, Wear It Purple Day? You know, the little things like that make a bit of a difference because people go, you're making an effort to engage our community. Why is it important? It creates participation opportunities by reducing barriers. It makes people feel safe and welcome, builds social connection, and progresses behaviour and culture change in your club. And this is a quote we kind of like to put out there, is that no longer sport and recreation, there's a typo there, should be seen as a place where people do not feel safe or welcome. Practical tips for your clubs. I'm not going to go through them all. This presentation will be available to you, and we're available for you to access, so feel free to contact us. But on there you can see there's some little things, but the first thing I would say to you is do a self-check first, because the last thing you want is to be engaging communities into your club for them to not actually be safe. So do that self-check, and don't let it be one person. Get a few different people to chat and go through it, because you may have a slightly blinkered view based on your experiences. So it's good to ask other people what their experiences are. And if you want to get in touch with us, that's our generic email. And if you have a very specific question that you'd like myself to answer beyond this, Olivia has my details, so you can ask her for them, and I'm more than happy to answer them. And our website is up there as well. Oh, stop share. I'll just have a quick look in the Q&A because I couldn't see them while I was running. Awesome, nothing specific, I don't think. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Christine. We look forward to having you back on the panel later in the session as well tonight. So thank you, Christine, again. Now, up next, we would like to introduce the Shuttlecats Badminton Club. So we have Stephanie Chung and Nicole Castles, who are going to tell us more about their club. Stephanie and Nicole, join us, please.
Oh, hello.
Hey.
Hey, sup? Look, it's Nicole too.
Hi.
So really quick so that we can get this rolling. We're from the Shuttlecats, as Olivia so graciously introduced us. I'm Stephanie, I'm the president of the club, and this is Nicole. I'm not sure which side she is to me, so I'll just point to both.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm the secretary of the club.
And pretty much the Shuttlecats is a social badminton club that focuses on the LGBTQI plus community. We're really social. We really just play for fun, and we focus more on getting people comfortable with sports. So we play at MSAC, and we have a lot of great outside events as well on top of the badminton aspect. And perhaps Nicole can give us a little bit of history on the Shuttlecats.
Cool. So Shuttlecats, I guess, was born out of wanting to encourage more women to play badminton, especially kind of queer women as well. So with the help of Smashers a few years ago, we established a group that was funded by Badminton Victoria, which was awesome. They gave us a lot of support. And we were able to get a lot of, we actually had quite a swelling of interest of people wanting to play with us. And that enabled us to actually form our own club, stand up on our own 2 feet. And we've been a club since 2018, a formal club since 2018. And we had our debut year in 2017. So it's been really amazing to have, to grow this little community and get people interested playing in badminton, having a lot of fun with us at the same time.
Yeah, we're still a pretty small club, but we're hoping that, you know, as soon as life gets sort of back to normal, we can start having sessions again, and we'd love to see everyone there and play. I guess we'll give it back to Olivia now.
Sure thing, Chicken Wing. Thank you, ladies, for sharing. Now I'd like to invite Mark and Sang from the Melbourne Smashers. So yes, welcome. And yeah, they'll share a little bit about their club.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. Just a bit of an introduction first. So my name's Mark. I'm the Vice President of the Melbourne Smashers Club. So I'll just give it a bit of a brief history of Melbourne Smashers, and then so we've been around for about 10 years or so informally, and we've been incorporated for the last 5. So we started off as a group of friends just playing together, and we're just in the gay community, and would hire a court at MSAC, and that's sort of how it started. And over time, friends would invite friends, and a few more came, and it sort of became an informal group that was running for quite a few years, and there'd be 15 or so, maybe 20 people would show up for a session. 5 years ago, we incorporated as an official badminton club, and then we've grown over that period. So we started off at sort of 20 people just playing informally, to now our membership is over 170 people. We play 3 times a week, and we get about 60 to 70 people turning up at each session. We're predominantly, we are not predominantly, we are totally a social club. Our focus is on meeting up to play badminton in a social environment, and also focus on doing things outside of badminton as part of the club. So it's a way for our members to connect to the community, and also to feel sort of welcome and inclusive within the grounds of sport. From a personal level, as a kid in school, sport was always seen as, well, that's what the jocks do. I didn't really fit into that scenario. It was the teachers only focused on the jocks and that sort of thing. So sport to me was never anything that I even considered that I'd want to be part of. And it's only in my late 30s that I joined a volleyball club, of all things, when I moved to New York to meet some new people, that I suddenly realized that sport can be social, it can be for fun, and it's a great way of meeting people. And it's been a big focus on the club to sort of work to enable members of the community to feel part of that community and be able to express themselves. I'll hand over to Sang, and he can give a bit of introduction about himself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sang, and I'm one of the committee members on the Smashers Badminton Club as well. I'm actually the secretary and currently the club diversity officer. My pronouns are him and he, and I've got some talking notes. So I'm just going to read through those, but hopefully they'll be interesting enough that you continue to listen. I really just want to start by saying that an acknowledgement of other people's connection to a country that predates me is not new. My family are first generation immigrants. My family are Chinese Cambodian, and we arrived in Australia via plane on the land of the Wurundjeri people. And it's with this, I'd like to, on behalf of the club, acknowledge the people of the Eastern Kulin Nations as the traditional custodians of the land in which we play and our will conduct our club. I'd like to also recognise the continuing connection to the land, its waters and culture, and pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So I guess I just want to talk a little bit about my story and I guess my role as diversity officer in the Smashers Badminton Club. I just want to begin by saying that the club is a really important part of my coming out story. I basically started coming to play after a breakup. I was in a relationship for 8 years, and it was for me really important to find a safe place to be with the gay community. At that stage, I didn't really have that many gay friends, and I really needed to extend my network, and I thought that was a really important part of what I needed. I think it's really important for people to find, a place that they belong and be accepted. I think that's really important for us as a club to be as welcoming and inclusive as possible, particularly when I think, if you face any kind of discrimination or marginalisation in other areas of community and you try and enter one that you think you belong to and people aren't particularly nice, I think it's a big problem. So entering the community is also full on. I think it's, it's really hard. I'm just going to be honest in terms of, I guess, the community I'm part of, the gay community. A lot of what we do socially involves alcohol as well. And I think it's really important for us, to have sport, which is, not about drinking and hanging out. And there are actually other ways of being social and other ways of connecting that, don't involve those type of things. So I joined the committee last year and became the diversity officer. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that have been important to me in terms of when I started. I think I was really lucky that Mark, who's now the vice president, was actually president at the time. And he was really interested in, beyond looking at the community, beyond just running the club and really doing some more advocacy work within the LGBTIQ+ space. I'm really lucky that the current president, is also really strong on the community support for our members. And so we're actually interested in doing things beyond just playing badminton socially. A friend of mine actually asked me why we needed a diversity officer in the club. And I think, we're so used to thinking of ourselves as gay men, as diverse, and we forget that, there's a lot more marginalised communities and identities out there within our community. And I think we don't necessarily do a really good job of recognising that. And I think, even when I joined the community, I don't think the representation was necessarily there in terms of the diversity of our cohort. Last year we started a trans and gender diverse engagement piece. To be honest with you, I didn't really know if our members were really ready for that. I think I spoke to someone who I knew who identified as trans, and we started looking at some of the barriers to play, and there were several things that really needed addressing from what I could see. The first one was getting our members to create an inclusive space about what was appropriate and what wasn't appropriate. And for us, we've really had to start the community in terms of getting them to understand sex and gender, and really hopefully, doing that advocacy work with our members eventually as well. The other barrier was advocating for gender neutral facilities at MSAC. I mean, there was this idea about asking whether we needed them. Did we have, trans or more gender diverse communities that were coming to play with us, and at the time they weren't. But for me, I think it's really important to provide those facilities up front so that that barrier doesn't have to exist. It doesn't have to be that additional conversation if they want to play with us. We also had to really think about if the club was the right place for those more diverse communities, and whether it was better supported through another club or even a new club. I think Mark at the time was definitely interested in organising sessions that were particularly targeted at that community, and we've been trying to catch up with one of our sponsors, Thorn Harbour, around helping to connect us with that community. Another thing that came up in the conversations was that due to the kind of discrimination that the trans and gender diverse communities face, a lot of time they're financially disadvantaged as well. And so for us, in terms of the club, we obviously you have to pay to come and play. And so it was, part of the impetus for us to start a program called the Equitable Access Program, where we provide support to people who have financial reasons why they potentially can't participate in the club, including not just the play but also our social events. We're really lucky that I think the club is really well run fiscally. That's obviously not my responsibility, so I can't take any credit for that. And we've been really good at kind of fundraising for that. And I think the current president is very kind of active within the space. We've actually extended that program to also include those who have been affected by COVID-19 as well. Last year, we also developed an acknowledgement of country to recognise Indigenous sovereignty. I think it's been a good starting point to start the conversation around Indigenous sovereignty, but I'm really conscious that of being tokenistic around this. And I think for us, there's still a lot of work to do in regards to engaging the community and also engaging our members. I think, I don't know, I have to be really honest. I think some of the work that we've been trying to do, I know Mark and I have been trying to do, has not necessarily been, supported from the very start. I think Mark has been really supportive in this space, but I don't think it's necessarily something that I think the committee or even our general members are really ready for. But I think it's part of our role to really have those conversations and advocate for those who are, I guess, a little bit more disadvantaged than us. And that's pretty much us at the moment, and hopefully some of that made sense, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have in regards to anything else as well. Was there anything else that I missed, Mark?
No, I think you covered a lot there. So we'll hand it back, hey?
Thanks so much, Sang and Mark, for that. And yeah, really great information. And I think like what they're talking about is a great lead way into our discussion panel. So I'd actually like to invite Mark and Sang, Stephanie, Nicole, Christine, and Rudy back online, and we can actually answer some of the questions that have come through. So before we go to what's come up in the Q&A, we did receive a few questions beforehand. I think it's fair that we can chat about them first. One of the questions that came through was, what are practices you would like to see all coaches implement to foster inclusivity in their teams? And I guess I think we mentioned a little bit about just some of the few things that can help a LGBTI person. But yeah, what do you have any experience, or what have you done to kind of improve the experience for someone who may be LGBTI plus?
I can't speak specifically around examples for LGBTI that I've seen. What we do know is that statistically, particularly young people will drop out of sport primarily because of their parents, but secondly because of coaches, and that the coaches are not supportive or don't create the right environment for young people particularly. I can provide examples around cultural diversity with a club that I was involved in, and some young women came into the club. No one went and met them, problem number one. So I wandered over in all of my goalkeeping gear very slowly and introduced myself to them, and then introduced them to the coach, who asked them their names. And this was a few years back, so I don't remember them off the top of my head, but they were names that were culturally specific to their country of birth, and his response was, well, that's too difficult, I'll just call you this. I know, I see your face, Sang. And if that is the response you are getting from coaches, it doesn't provide that sense of you actually care about me as a person, and that you have the time for me. So fostering inclusive practices from coaches to me is around using appropriate language, listening to your participants and understanding their needs. So if you have someone who identifies as non-binary or transgender or lesbian or gay or whatever that may be, A, you don't point it out and make a thing about it, which happens to people, and B, that you actually respect them and use the terms that they ask you to use. Don't assume that there are not people within your club. So make sure that the language you're using from the start is appropriate. It shouldn't change just because you become made aware of someone, or because someone raises their hand and says, hey, this is me. It should just be there from the start. So they're just, I guess, a couple of things that we would like to see from coaches.
And I think we discussed before that, you know, having a more inclusive culture is not just inclusive for maybe a marginalized community that you have in mind, but it's inclusive for every person, and every person can feel more welcome and feel more comfortable, more safer to be themselves in what and celebrate whatever it is that makes them unique or unified, because everyone needs to have the same needs, that they all want community and belonging. So
yeah, I would say, just touching on that, Olivia, like one of the things I'll say to clubs is you don't have to be everything to everyone, in the sense of you don't have to run disability specific programs or LGBTQI specific programs, cultural diverse programs, but what we would love for clubs to have is a baseline of inclusion, in the sense that if I come to your club as someone with a disability or someone from a different background, that I feel included and that I feel safe and welcome. And that is around your language and your images and your policies and how you deal with situations that arise. So you don't need to run a program for me necessarily. If you want to and you have the capacity to, great, and there are needs for that, but you don't have to, as long as you as a club can create this environment that means I can actually come in and that I know I can come in.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Otherwise we can move on to the next question.
I've just got a really sorry, Sang, go. What were you going to say?
No, I wasn't going to say anything important. I was just going to say, I think that piece around inclusion is also around, like, you know, I know that I've been at the club for about 6 years, and I think when Mark took over the club, that piece around actually approaching new members and speaking to them and all of that kind of stuff is actually really, really important. It's that kind of one-to-one interaction and that acknowledgement and that speaking and asking and all of those things. And for me, I feel like the club is much more inclusive than it used to be, because of, I think, you know, when Mark was president, the way just led in terms of being open to the new people and, you know, encouraging everyone else to also engage. Because I know, let's be honest, you know, it's a big club and we can be a bit cliquey as well. Would you agree with that, Mark? You know, especially if you've been going for a while. And I think, you know, that piece around like actually having to get up and go and talk to the new person is really important.
Yeah, and I think part of that as well is for some people, for a lot of people, it's a big step to come out in whatever term, whatever reason that is, sort of thing. So the first time they come into a club, or there's concern about, am I going to be gossiped about, and so when someone makes that first step to be involved, I think it's really important to make an extra effort to make sure they feel welcome, included, so that we can encourage them to be able to come back. Because a lot of people, and I was one of those, just the first time I went into a club, a gay club, and to play sport, I walked and back and forth the door about 4 times before I would even walk in, just because of the nerves about, oh, who's going to be in that door? Who am I going to be welcomed? Am I going to be accepted? So having that being aware of the headspace that some people can be in when they come in is important.
Okay, Rudy, did you wanted to add something to it?
Oh yeah, just really quickly. The first thing that I did, even before I came out, was I just dropped all the gendered language that I knew that revolved around coaching badminton. So particularly like mixed doubles. For example, when I competed, I played doubles and mixed doubles. So I know from firsthand experience, being referred to as the girl player in mixed doubles was probably something that will always break my heart, even though it will never happen again. So, you know, just referring, like if you're coaching, referring to it as the front player and the back player, or the player on this side or the player on that side, or, you know, not assuming people's pronouns before you get to know them, or before they tell you, or before you ask. Really, language is often the first thing that we experience from someone. So if you can, you know, make sure that you use a blanket language that's not gender specific, that can really make someone feel comfortable right from the very second. Because often if they are gender diverse, they will notice. We will notice if you're using gender neutral language, I promise you.
Just on that, Rudy, a bit of sort of advice. So if I want to ask you what the pronouns are, like, because I think a lot of people would feel uncomfortable. Oh, am I going to offend you? How should I ask things? So what's the best way there, or some advice on how that would happen?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I answered it. I have a YouTube video link that I think is provided, or we can provide at a different point. I got asked this question on my Instagram and I answered it in the video. A really simple question is being proactive. An answer is being proactive. So for example, often what I'll do is not even to assert my own gender identity, but just to make the other person feel comfortable. I'll say, hi, my name's Rudy. I use he, him pronouns. Nice to meet you, or welcome, or what's your name? And 9 times out of 10, the people will respond with their pronouns as well. I've done this in a retail setting with lots of different kinds of people, and yeah, 9 times out of 10, they will give you their pronouns back. Even if they're a little bit uncomfortable, they don't understand why you've asked or said it. Yeah, so that makes it really easy.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I remember I had a quick look at your video, Rudy. I'll send that out tomorrow, just like a link about it. But yeah, really great advice in terms of being proactive, because I know being a cisgendered woman, it's definitely something I've never thought about. So thanks for sharing. I think we've got one more question that came through, and I think this may address a few of the other questions that came up. But the other question we got was about, so badminton is quite a gender defined a sport. You know, we have the men's and women's mixed doubles, as Rudy mentioned. And they were asking, this person was asking, how can we make it more inclusive of trans, non-binary, or GNC youth and adults in the social training and competition spaces? I think happy to address the competition space a little bit. So actually I've invited, so Nick Pettitt, who I mentioned earlier, he's online at the moment, and he's our tournaments and events manager, and he can provide us a little bit of a scope, I guess, of where badminton currently sits with this question.
Thanks, Olivia. I can, and unfortunately the answer is not very well at the moment. So, as we're all aware, the competition particularly reflects a very binary view of genders, and it's kind of baked in at the moment that we have this men's and women's strict divisions. So from Badminton Victoria's point of view, where we can make a change, we are trying to do so. So those competitions that we run where they're not what's called a sanctioned event, i.e. they're not counted towards points at the national and international level, we are making changes to those competitions. For the competitions that we run, which are included at national and international level, we have already started the conversation with Badminton Australia, who effectively govern those competitions, who have started the conversation with Badminton World Federation. So unfortunately, this is one of those things where we're a little bit tied, because it's a global response. A global answer has to be found, but where we can make changes, we certainly are making changes. It's not the best answer. It's a reflection of reality, and it reflects the very root of the conversation we're having, that there is a very binary view of these things. So hopefully that answers that portion of the question.
Thank you for the insight, Nick. Did anyone else have any comments of, I guess, maybe outside the competition space in terms of social play, maybe more social competition? I think we touched on it a little bit, but was there any additional comments?
Well, socially at the Shuttlecats, because we're aimed at beginners and we really just want a lot of people to play together, we just play doubles. Like, no specifically what it is, just, hey, let's find some friends and we'll play 4 people on this court, and then we'll rotate and mix with each other so that we can just get to know more people. That's sort of what we do in our kind of social space. And I'm sure that's similar to what the Smashers do as well.
Yeah, sort of tied in the competition. So, like I said, when we started out, we were like 20 or so people just playing informally on a fairly regular basis, and that's all it was. And there wasn't a gay club as such, and that sort of grew out of nothing really. However, just for people's awareness, we run a tournament every year called the Trans-Tasman Tournament. That started off between, there's a gay club in Sydney, there's a gay club in Auckland, there's a gay club in Wellington, there's one in Brisbane, there's one in Perth. So over the last couple of years, that tournament has grown to now, we held it in Melbourne last year, and it had nearly 150 participants flew in from all over the country and from New Zealand to participate, and that rotates every year. So again, it's a way of connecting to the broader community and allowing people to sort of express themselves. And then there is the broader gay games that's run throughout the world. I've attended a few of those in Europe and in the US as well. So there is a broader community out there, and people take it from just being social and having fun to being quite serious. So in our club, we've got people who just come along to have a hit. Others come along and they want to have a hit, but they also want to have a bit of a competition or competitive game as well.
Yeah, and we don't actually gender our social sessions or the categories in terms of our competition either. So they're completely open. So what we do is we obviously, like Mark said, have a range of abilities of play, and we're really lucky that our club is big enough that we can actually segment the players into a range of abilities, and those people who have those abilities in terms of I guess level play together as part of that kind of social competition is kind of what we call it, I guess.
Just really quickly, if we've got time, I'd like to add something, Olivia. Cool. From the perspective of someone who's played competitively for a long time, and one of the main factors for feeling like I need to retire from badminton, at least until I physically appear and present and are accepted in a general level as at face value as male, I feel one of the reasons why I don't feel comfortable, even now being on testosterone for almost 2 years, albeit not at a full dose, I still don't pass for the most part as male. So I don't feel comfortable participating in the male category, despite, I guess, what you would call medically fitting into that category, because I think it really starts with the culture. Because if I was to walk into a stadium and participate in the male categories, like male doubles, or play the male part in mixed doubles, I would feel like very like I would be responsible for educating someone, or I would feel, you know, responsible for answering people's questions, or inadvertently being the token trans person in the competition. So to kind of circumnavigate someone feeling like that, it really, like Christine was saying earlier, depends on the culture that you build for your club, or that you build as a governing entity, or even just a tournament director on the day, and making sure that the people who are from a diverse background just feel like everyone else, and that there's no reason for them to feel unsafe or even a little bit uneasy, because obviously when you're trying to compete, you want to feel confident and comfortable in your ability and in yourself. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Sorry, I just realized I'm probably a bit late in realizing, but we are a bit over time. I think maybe the other few questions are addressed to Rudy. So maybe Rudy, if you want to, maybe a last comment, maybe summing up a few of these points, and then we'll wrap up. Is that okay?
Sure. Go on, sorry.
About did your family support you? And there was a question about how did you focus on your passion when people around you didn't understand?
Okay, so really quickly, so my family, yes, they've always been supportive. I came out as queer at 12 and a half. So, you know, they've kind of, I'm just one of those kids, really. No, I have always been supportive. My family are awesome. I live with my grandma. She is a bomb. Yeah, I've got like nothing ever. They've always been super, super good. Family, badminton family, like I said, I didn't come out until I was an adult, and by that time I'd kind of departed from the club that I'd been playing with for my whole life. So I didn't really have a badminton family, though the people that I was playing badminton with, like, you know, I kind of wouldn't have associated with myself with them if I didn't feel confident in how they would react. So yeah, that was really good for me. What was the next one? Sorry.
How did you focus on your passion when people around you didn't understand?
Look, I think I've always been a really patient person, and I was grateful to have experienced some close friends growing up transition as well. So I was able to take what I could from their experience and learn and grow from that and use it in my own way. I've always been someone that likes to listen and likes to hear what the other person has to say, and really do more of a conversational sort of thing, and really try to respect everyone despite what they might believe or understand at the time. So that's kind of how I've dealt with it. And also just having a really good support network. I've always gone to counsellors I've always, you know, I'm not going to hide that, you know, I've seen psychologists and people like that, because I think they're very vital to maintaining and working on your mental health and how you view yourself in the world. So just always making sure that you're supported no matter what you're going through, big or small. That kind of thing is really, really important.
Thanks so much for sharing. So with that, sorry, we're a bit over time, but I will probably need to wrap up. So thank you for all your questions. And if you haven't got the answer that you wanted, or we didn't get around to it, we'll try and get to answer your question directly, or with enough interest, we might consider a follow-up event. But we will also send out an email tomorrow asking for feedback, or maybe any other questions, a bit more information about what we shared tonight as well. So you can expect that tomorrow. Of course, we want to thank our guest speakers once again for their time tonight. So Rudy Rigg and Christine Granger, Stephanie Chung, Nicole Castles, Mark Gristock, Sang Tai, Nick Pettitt, thank you for joining in last minute there. And also wanted to thank Sport and Recreation Victoria and Vicsport for supporting the event as well. So yeah, we'll catch up with an email tomorrow to you. So yeah, this has been the LGBTI plus edition of Love All Play, the talk series. So keep an eye out on our Badminton Victoria news, emails, or social media for potentially the next event. We hope to do more of these talks. And yeah, just thanks for joining us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.